Hello, this is Mr. Gray. Today we are going to talk about the properties of water. We're going to focus on the essential question that is, why is water so important to life and living things? So one thing that you have to understand about water is it has some really unique properties. And those properties basically allow life to exist. It's one of the reasons that when we look for life outside of this planet, like if we look in our universe as we explore, we're looking for water. We're looking for water because in order for life to exist as we know it, water has to be present. So if we can find some water, we'll be able to find some other living organisms. So the properties that we're going to explore throughout this presentation are polarity, solubility, cohesion, adhesion, a high heat capacity, and the density of ice. Some really unique properties of water. So to start with, we're going to go with polarity. So what is polarity? When you hear about a magnet has two poles, right? A positive and a negative. When we consider polarity for molecules, it's essentially the same thing. Although water has an overall neutral charge, the charge is unevenly distributed. So if you look at this little picture here, you can see oxygen has a -2 charge, and hydrogen, each of the hydrogen carry a proton, so those balance out. So the overall charge is neutral. However, the distribution of those charges on this side over here towards the oxygen side of the molecule is more negative. Towards the hydrogen side of the molecule, it's more positive. So that uneven distribution of the charge makes water what we consider a polar compound. So again, it's a compound that's going to have an uneven distribution of the charge. So the next property is solubility. Because water is polar, it makes water able to dissolve other polar substances. So things like sugars and ionic compounds like sodium chloride, or as we know it, salt, and even some proteins. So one important factor that you need to remember is that water is known as the universal solvent. So it dissolves things. So solvents are things that dissolve things. So if you look at this picture, you can see that you have little water molecules, the red and the gray color. You can see that they kind of look like Mickey Mouse. They are referred to as like the Mickey Mouse molecule. Basically what they're going to do is the negative parts of these oxygen molecules are going to start to attract those positive sodiums. And the positive sides of the water molecule are going to attract those negative chloride ions. So as a result, the ions or the ionic compound is going to dissociate. In this case, the sodium and the chloride. Na represents sodium, Cl represents the chloride, are going to dissociate or break apart and dissolve into the solution. So water is considered the universal solvent. Another factor that makes water really interesting and useful is cohesion. So cohesion is the attractive force that holds molecules of the same substance together. So cohesion, think same substance sticking together. So cohesion is responsible for creating what's called surface tension. Surface tension is basically thin skin-like feature that you can see, like if you were to put some drops of water on the surface of a penny, it's going to create this nice big little dome, and it's held together by that surface tension as indicated by this picture. You also see little insects walking on top of water, and they're able to do that because of the surface tension that's created with cohesion, or those water molecules basically being attracted to each other like a bunch of little magnets, creating a tension on the water, allowing this water strider to be able to walk on top of that water. The next property of water is adhesion. So adhesion is the attractive forces between two different substances. So an example is like water and glass. So water will stick to the edge of the glass. It's not going to just roll off the glass like it would a piece of wax paper. So as a result, like you can see over here on the right hand, we talked about pieces of equipment the other day. And one of the pieces of equipment we talked about was a graduated cylinder and how you had to read the bottom of the meniscus in order to determine the proper volume that was in that graduated cylinder. Well, that meniscus is created because you have adhesion with the glass and the water. And as a result, it creates a little curve and it makes the water kind of stick up on the edges a little bit, creating that curve. So you have to read the bottom of the meniscus to get the proper reading. Capillarity is another important factor for life, especially for plants, that allows water to basically be used for the plant as it evaporates up through the leaves, or from the roots out through the leaves through transpiration in capillary action. So capillarity is the attraction between molecules that result in the rise of the surface liquid when in contact with a solid. So together, adhesion and cohesion and capillarity help water rise through narrow tubes up against gravity. Now in my classroom I have this little tube demo that I actually set up where I take some water and some food coloring and I just put it in there. I put the food coloring in so you could actually see it. But when you put these narrow tubes into the device, you can see the water in the narrowest tubes climbs really high up. And it's doing that because of the capillary action, or the attractiveness of the adhesion, the cohesion of water, and the capillarity all helping that water rise up. Those little intermolecular forces that are allowing it to rise up against gravity. And the wider the tube gets, the less the adhesion is going to be able to work up against gravity. So you have it's not able to rise up as high against gravity. The next is high heat capacity. So water has a high heat capacity. Water can absorb and release large amounts of energy. So this allows oceans to help us regulate the temperature of the earth enough to allow life to exist. So this also helps regulate the temperature in some cases, like on land in certain areas. If I think of like the Bahamas, they have a pretty comfortable, relatively speaking, temperature compared to other areas that are not surrounded by water. So the Bahamas are completely surrounded by water. They're islands. And as a result of the large amounts of water that are regulating the temperature there, it remains pretty comfortable there year round, rather than it getting super hot like it does on the interior of some continents, like the Sahara in Africa. The density of ice is another unique property of water. So unlike most solids, water is actually less dense as a solid. So that allows lakes and ponds to freeze from the top down and insulates the water below. So that's going to allow the fish and other aquatic organisms to survive. So if you've ever looked at an ice cube inside of a glass of water, it floats. It floats because it is less dense as a solid. And in nature, that really helps protect those organisms from the cold that could be occurring above the surface. So I want you to take a second and answer this question. Identify the property of water that best describes each situation. A water strider insect is able to walk on water. So what is the property of water for that? B, water molecules bond with other water molecules as they are transported through a plant. C, sodium and chloride ions dissolve and are able to be transported into and out of the cell. So take a second, write down an answer for each of those. Okay, now I'm going to go over the answer for each of those. So for A water strider insect able to walk on water, that's going to be a result of surface tension, a property of water. B, water molecules bond with each other or with other water molecules as they are transported throughout a plant. Water molecules bonding with other water molecules is going to be cohesion. Water molecules bonding with other water molecules would be cohesion. And lastly, sodium and chloride ions dissolve and are able to be transported into and out of a cell. And the fact that they're able to dissolve is because water is a universal solvent. It's able to dissolve those molecules. All right, that ends our presentation for today. Please make sure you take some time to review your notes right after or soon after hearing a presentation. Anytime that helps increase your retention, anytime you're trying to learn a new concept, whether it be science or anything else. Have a great day.